Welcome to Equipped in Grace, where we talk about following Jesus in the chaos of real life. I'm Vinny Pizarski, and if you've ever wondered how to bring your Sunday faith into your Monday meetings, your parenting, your relationships, or just your everyday mess, well, this podcast is for you. So let's get outside of the church pew and get equipped for discipleship in the wild world in which we live. On today's episode, we pick up part 2 of a conversation with Kelsey Lukasevic, who has been sharing her story of dealing with anorexia and her journey towards victory in that battle. If you haven't listened to part 1 of this conversation, I do recommend you go back and check out our previous episode, as we'll be diving right back in where we left off. As a quick refresher, Kelsey ended last week by describing her reluctant trip to rehab while she was finishing 8th grade and finally realizing that this eating disorder had gotten out of her control. So Kelsey, this had to be a pretty humbling experience as everyone's headed to their 8th grade trip. You're going to Wisconsin.
Yes.
That had to be a little bit of a wake-up call, I imagine. So does rehabilitation, does that work? Does that help? How did that contribute from there?
Yes. So a part of the story, which I could not fit into the words of my devotional, but for me, it was a different experience than I think most people naturally would have. The very first night I was in inpatient, my dad's mom died. And my grandma and I had an incredibly close relationship. And so, you know, she was a heavy smoker for most of her life. So she had a lot of health problems when I was growing up naturally. And I loved to pray when I was a kid, always praying. And we had a really good, faithful household. And so, you know, I prayed a lot and I loved it. And whenever she would get back into the hospital or have some kind of health problem, I would pray for her and she would get better. And so I'm not saying I was the reason, but you know, it was one of those things that I valued prayer. I knew what prayer could do. And at one point she called me her guardian angel, and my parents had talked to me one time and just be like, please don't take that. I mean, as a blessing as that was, it's heavy for however old I was at that point, like 9, 8. I have no idea what that means, but I take onto things and I really grasp hold of them. And so, you know, throughout my time of when I was in the anorexia phase, when I was going through this, living this every day, I withdrew heavily from God because I knew this was not his will. And so for me to pray that, you know, I knew the Lord's Prayer, obviously, but your will be done. I knew this was not his will. So I kind of retreated, and I couldn't pray to God because he would take all of this away. He knew this wasn't right. This was not something he wanted for me. And one of the only moments in my entire life that I felt the presence, the voice of God was during that. And I was going to bed at night, one time doing my usual, calculating all my calories. I was lying there, just every thought was racing about how many calories will tomorrow bring? What am I going to eat? All this. And I went down, I moved my hands down over my hips, just naturally lying in bed. And it hit me in that moment. I felt how much my hip bones were protruding out of me. And it was in that moment that this immediate sense of, oh my gosh, I have to stop this, overcame me. It was the most intense feeling. And I remember just hearing, you are not okay. You have to stop this. You are not going to be okay. And then the next day I continued it as I would have. I was right back in it, but it was in this process of to me, when I first got to inpatient, my grandmother died, the one who I was praying for all the time, and then stopped praying for her because I was selfish and I was not going to pray. And so it was kind of this, everything all at once just kind of imploded. And it was, to me, a very identifying moment of my mission failed. I failed my grandma. I failed God. I failed my parents, and everything just in that moment sank.
Sure.
So the process of my rehabilitation was different because it was scarred by this moment, very much marked by this moment. I was not allowed to go to her funeral. My mom had to, it was that to me killed for sure. My mom had to stay behind with me. Of course, someone had to be there. So a lot of people in my family didn't know. And my dad and my 2 other sisters go to my grandma's funeral being like, where are Kelsey and your mom? And so it was just all these things coming on at once. And it was heavy. And the moment I experienced anxiety for the first time in my life was when I was an inpatient, and we had visiting hours, and my parents came to visit. I believe it was before the funeral, and they come and they sit on the bed across from me in my room and just kind of look at me, and I had no idea what to say. My dad's mom just died. He's a mess. My parents are seeing how I was 13 at the time when I was in rehab, their 13-year-old girl in this position where they feel that they cannot help. They have tried what they could do, and now she is here. Like, this is all these things. And I remember saying, like, what am I supposed to say to them? I have nothing to say. What am I supposed to say? I'm having a good time. Like, no, I'm not having a good time. All these things.
Rehab
and so
is a blast.
Yeah. So it was in that moment, I just felt it. I've never been one to not know what to say when I was a kid, especially. I was very chatty, but it kind of overpowered me. And so the rest of inpatient, and then when I moved to outpatient as well, it was hard. I was still a brat. I was moody. I was not happy. I had to do the steps. I had to do the steps to get out.
Yeah.
You had to gain a certain amount of weight before you left. And it was so hard being that far away from my family as well.
Yeah.
And so there was a point, technically you were supposed to be an outpatient until you reached your goal weight. And I didn't get there by the time I was just like, I am not okay. There's just so much going on. Our family just kind of was shattered, and just my sisters, are having to deal with this too. They're being not necessarily neglected, but there's so much energy going into me.
Right.
And they are trying to mourn their grandma's death, their sister being in, this state. And so it's a lot. And so to be that far away was just not working. And so it was kind of a turn of events. I tried this rehab. Gosh, it's such a hard word. The fact that I went here was so difficult, but rehabilitation facility in Cleveland. And then just everything that I was trying there just gave me so much anxiety as well. So we were able to talk with the counselor that told my parents I needed to go to rehab. And we worked with her for me to get back to my goal weight. And I did. It was the end of winter of my 9th grade year. So I was about 14 at the time, kind of finally reached my goal weight out of the anorexia.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked as far as I got to my goal weight eventually. Yeah. But my story was just a little bit different because so much had kind of plagued how the experience I think was supposed to go. While I was going to be an emotional, mental wreck regardless, just to add on top of my family and just this broken state is hard. And so we kind of had to pivot and get to a place where we could all kind of get in this healing together.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like there was a certain level of recovery from rehabilitation, but not full freedom.
Correct. Yeah.
So that probably takes, and now we have trauma built on top of this. So that's going to take a little while to unpack as well. Walk us through then the journey forward from there. So you're at your goal weight. It sounds like there's a little bit of reluctance to that, or you understand maybe the math that needs to happen for you to stay out of trouble. But now there's some scars and maybe not freedom. Walk us through then. We'll just walk us forward, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like I said, I overcame the anorexia as far as I wasn't restricting anymore. But I was still very aware. I've been very aware of my health since that time. And I obeyed. I ate. I still had fear foods. Fear was not a comfort thing for me at all. It was something I had to do. But I mean, I lived it. It was enough for people to think I was fine. And I mean, I was okay. I was still living a life of kind of somewhat normal for my age of being a teen. But then, as my teens went on and such, and I no longer had soccer as my daily activity and everything, I really kind of capitalized into just fitness overall. And so, and I enjoy fitness. I love it. It is what I still really enjoy today. And the journey of how I view fitness has drastically changed. But back then, fitness became my new anorexia. And so I worded it as I overcame disordered eating, but I didn't overcome disordered thinking, because I still looked at myself and I still saw that 10-year-old overweight girl, and I hated her. I still hated that time. I hated what I looked like. I still hated what I looked like in that moment. I never saw myself as attractive. And I valued that heavily back then. And so was still just constantly struggling with just throughout high school, throughout my young 20s, just everything. What am I if I am not in shape, if I am not attractive to other people? I didn't feel like I was anything. I was still so consumed by my anxiety around that as well, that it really then took over my life, as I had to make sure that I was working out however many times a week, however long, all this. And so while eating was not controlling me, working out then became controlling me.
Right. You kind of exchanged one demon for another.
Exactly. And so that really has carried on. That, like I said, it was really just through my whole 20s. Just, I still did not feel the joy I felt as the kid I was before my accident. Mm-hmm. And so that joy that I felt that Satan took away, that he realized that that joy was coming from God. He was like, no, not anymore. Your joy is going to come from how you think others perceive you. And that's how I kind of live the rest of my life. Am I happy? I don't know. Do I feel attractive today? I guess that's what that'll determine it. And, I had an unhealthy relationship with working out, really just a lot of high intensity stuff. And, your body is not really supposed to jump that much. Really, I was I did a lot of jumping activities. I know it sounds weird, but, and so my body just was always some kind of hurting. It was just being overworked. It was being overused. I didn't understand, I needed to build strength on top of that and all this. So really this entire journey was just me being so focused on working out, and people had to see me as someone who was in shape and valued what I could get my body to look like. Mm-hmm. And it was true. It was, I had validation through how many people I thought found me attractive, or, I was dating on and off in my 20s too. And just did people swipe right on me on the dating apps,
oh boy, yeah.
Those kind of things. It's just, that was fuel. The more I felt people were appreciating what I look like because I was trying so hard, the more I was like, okay, this is it. This is how I have to live my life. And so, while the disordered thinking really just continued, my eating wasn't necessarily the best. There was still a lot of fear. The working out was controlling everything. I was kind of a mess, and I never recognized it.
Right. But now you're a socially approved mess.
Exactly. Yeah. Now because no one sees.
That's the trick. And that's I feel like it's kind of like a virus. Mm-hmm. It mutates.
Absolutely.
And Jesus talks about this. You cast out one demon, but if something wholesome doesn't come in and take its place, well, then another demon or more demons just come in and fill in the void that was there. Mm-hmm. So we get rid of disordered eating, but I love that you said, you got over disordered eating, but not disordered thinking. Mm-hmm. And so this very clever, this clever virus, if you will, has now mutated. Mm-hmm. So now it's not disordered eating. Now other things, exercise, and other people's perception of you is now controlling. Mm-hmm. So again, but that's socially acceptable because
Absolutely.
Now you look healthy, right. You're doing healthy things. And I feel like so many people fall into this category where they are socially acceptably unhealthy, where we're all suffering from some sort of disordered thinking and chasing approval in something that's ultimately empty. Mm-hmm. So part of your story then, at some point, Jesus starts to tap into this. Yes. Or life starts to maybe get disrupted in a way that Jesus is starting to be able to get through the cracks. Describe that.
Yes. So in January of 2024, at that point it had been, I believe, 18 years since, I started onto my anorexia journey, and he just kind of put it on my heart. I got over the anorexia, but I never processed it. I never went to counseling for it.
Right.
Being so young and having also experienced the trauma of my liver incident, there's a lot to process through. Mm-hmm. A lot of emotions, my grandma's death in there too. There was just a lot that I was carrying that I did not recognize, because I wasn't allowing myself to at the same time. And, it was kind of just this gentle nudge, last January. And it was kind of like, okay. And if you were in a small group with me at any point between the last year and a half, you've heard this, because I didn't know what it meant. It was just like, this is being brought up again. I haven't thought about my anorexia in that way in a really long time. I'm at a place, and I have been for years, that I will freely talk about it. I think there's not enough talk about it. I think it's very well, it's something that is not hidden in our community, that people struggle with eating. People struggle with body image. It's a taboo subject still. Yeah. As much as the industry is trying to move to this, be happy in your body, be happy with this, whatever else, we don't like when we talk about like people in such dramatic states.
Right.
So I just felt in myself, I'll talk about it freely. I didn't care. I'm okay being vulnerable about this. Mm-hmm. It wasn't new to me that it was kind of brought back up as far as like, okay, I still talk about it every now and then, but this felt different because it was like, Kelsey, there's something unsettled. There's something not done. Yeah. And so just gradually over the last year and a half, just trying to understand that and work through it. And I wanted this aha moment, this dramatic, this is God in a very real way, miracle turnaround life kind of moment. Right. And that's not how God works a lot of the time. But I never got that last year. And actually it was the exact opposite. So in 2024, January kind of put it on my heart. I started talking about it with people in the small groups, and I was like, look at me, I'm doing great. Look at me being vulnerable. Look at me sharing. So
are you impressed with my sharing?
Exactly. I was like, are you impressed that I'm this vulnerable? Come on, join me on the good side. So it was selfish. I did see it as selfish. I wanted to share my story, because it was my story, my glory. Then I started kind of grasping hold of things that, looked like God and had God in them. But we're not God. So last year in the spring, I accepted a position at the church because I started going to the women's small group here, Grounded, and this group of women that I had at that time were amazing. And I would leave this time with them feeling revived and refreshed. And it made sense. So I'd go to this and I'd expect this kind of like revival. And it was this amazing experience for me. And so when this position came open at the church, I was like, obviously, this is what I need to do because I'm trying to get closer to God. Working at a church is obviously going to get me closer to God. Working around people who are of God and with God and have this journey with God is going to get me closer. So I kind of grasped onto that because I was like, this will make me look like I am doing the right thing.
Well, that sounds a lot like the exercise.
Yeah, exactly. So, I grasped hold of this. I got the job and then I was in it. I was trying to work 2 jobs at the same time as well, 2 part-time. And as I took that job, everything just started crumbling. I was incredibly stressed. I am not someone who can work 2 jobs. I was working for a brewery and a church, which also doesn't always align in the same field. But so in this time, as I was expecting myself to have more of a revival and more of this connection with God, I was losing it. I was frustrated. I was mad. I was hurt because I was like, I'm at a church. Why am I not growing? Yeah. And then at the same time, I started, because I was so stressed, I started losing a lot of my hair. It started thinning drastically. I started having all these issues with my body, like my hips, which from years of putting so much aggression on them and also having just conditions, 2 different conditions that cause a lot of instability in my joints. Mm-hmm. There's a whole other different story, but, not recognizing that they needed a different kind of fitness, of strength that I was not giving them. But, all these things kind of came up at the same time. I started having horrible back pain, never had back pain in my entire life. And this back pain made me nauseous. It was so awful. And the amount of times I just cried and had no idea why. And it was more confusing because I was doing all the right things. Externally, I was with God. Yeah. And then as I was just kind of going throughout the rest of this year, I had to leave the job at the church because I was too stressed out and I hated that. I felt awful. I took away an opportunity from someone else. I left when I felt that this was supposed to be where I really was going to thrive, and I wasn't, and it was the exact opposite. And so, that was late summer of last year, and just moving into fall, all these things just kept happening. I kept just not understanding what was going on. All these things that I grasped onto how I looked with my hair. I have naturally curly hair, and there are those out there who love it. I was one of those who loved my naturally curly hair. People recognized me for it. That was changing drastically. This body, I felt my body was just breaking down. Nothing made sense. Everything hurt. I couldn't gain muscle the way I wanted to. And so my body, this working out, that all of a sudden became toxic to me because everything I did hurt. And I was like, what is happening? Everything that my value was based on is kind of deteriorating in front of me.
Yeah.
And I was going with it. I had nothing else to stand on in that point. And the amount of times that I just broke down and so openly cried out to God, why? Heal me miraculously. I believe in miracles. I believe in miracles for other people for sure. But heal me miraculously. And then also at the same time, having this constant doubt of, I don't get miracles. That's not me. God doesn't treat my life that way. God likes me to do the work. And I was always, I honestly think I was just very resentful of that, because I wanted these moments that people talk about. That's like, I read this scripture and it was in that moment my life changed. And I never thought the same way again. Yeah. And I was not having that at all. And so, I went through the rest of 2024, just here and there, things just always coming in, coming out, things that are challenging, some things that are great, me processing through my anorexia still with others, talking about it still freely. And then I come to February of 2025. One of the things I do in the morning is I just kind of go through the Bible app devotional. And so I started doing that, just having this more intentional time with God. And so one of my mornings, just in my quiet time, I was doing my devotion and all that. And it was the weekend leading up to the women's retreat at Grace. And in this time, I just felt all of a sudden, it really kind of fell out of nowhere, which is how you know it's a God moment. But I heard on my heart, remember her smile. And in that instant, I knew exactly what it was talking about, because this photo of my sisters and me that I saw as disgusting for 19 years, the thing that really kind of skyrocketed me into my anorexia, when I would envision that photo in my mind, I still saw the 10-year-old that was overweight, that was unattractive. And in that moment, God said, remember her smile, because and it cued me as like, oh my gosh, like I remember how happy I looked in that photo. Yeah. I remember that I had this big smile on my face. I remember that's how I lived my life. I remembered that I was always this happy kid. Like and granted, yes, you are a kid and things are different, but even still, it was like, I processed things so much differently even then. Like I did not feel like that same girl anymore. And this child of God that I was living into God when I was that young. And I did truly have a childlike faith, because I believed it. Absolutely. I believed everything. And it was that moment that God said, remember her smile. Remember who you were before anorexia took you, before your complete self-destruction took you. And it was, it made me cry, obviously. And I just broke down, because it was like, okay, this entire year and a half, all I've been wanting is to find these things that would bring me closer to God. But the thing I was missing most was going to God. And so it while it didn't, drastically give me this 180 in life, it was this moment that is something I remind myself regularly. And just the way God has worked in now this year in 2025 of just these things he's placed on my heart, these things that he has continued to say since that moment, just to remind me, like, you are not broken. You are not a broken person. You are while obviously we all have struggles and stuff through life, just the way I viewed myself of like, I always need fixed. It's like, I don't always need to be fixing myself in this way. God did not create me broken in the sense that he saw me in that way. And so I had to also be told, like, no one was ever healed by hate. And just over the years, all I did to myself was hate myself. And it always made me, anytime that people would reference, love your neighbor as yourself. For me, it was the other way around. Like, love yourself as you love your neighbor. I am really good at being kind and generous and loving to other people. 100%. I don't give myself any of that back. They need to see themselves in this way, but not me, because I absolutely not. And so it's just been this journey, and it's continuing. I don't know where processing my anorexia will lead, if it's going to anything else. It was just something that has just been just a huge part of my last year and a half, is just trying to understand how God is moving through this 19 years after.
Yeah. Goodness gracious. There's so much in there. I really appreciate you sharing all that with us, because that I feel like there are things that live under the surface of all of us, the traumas for many of us of something that happened when we were growing up that disorders our thinking and disorders the way we view ourselves. And I think that's a story for a lot of people, that they believe in treating others well, but they don't think of themselves well. I've certainly been there. And probably I'm just thinking now, recognizing my own thought patterns of going, oh yeah, I'm not very nice to myself in those moments or in this moment. So just thank you for your honesty in that and sharing that with us, and this is why we wanted to have you on the show, because this is something that I think a lot of people are dealing with, and maybe don't even realize that there's this unhealthy current, that there's still this virus that Satan has put there that opposes God's love. Because that's what Satan literally, it's not, I learned somewhere in the recent years that that's actually not his name, it's a title. It just means the one who is opposed. And Satan opposes, he has that title because he opposes the joy you had when you were a kid. He stands opposed to that, so he has to squash it and get rid of it and get you to invest in things that will never actually bring you the joy that you seek. And that's just so true for all of us. I know I'm looking at the things that I'm trying to seek joy in and recognize their hollowness, but it's kind of tough until stuff starts falling apart around us. So thank you again for sharing. And I just encourage those of you listening, if you find yourself in similar spots where the world is crumbling around you, I don't think it indicates an absence of God, but perhaps the beginning of his presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm sure that's more than enough for us to think about and chew on for this week. As we wrap up, I would like to thank one last time Kelsey Lukasevic for joining us on Equipped in Grace and for being so honest and transparent with her story. I thank you for listening and hope that our conversation has given you some insight into how you view yourself and the internal struggles that you may be wrestling with, as well as seeing God's view of you in a different light. We'll be back next week with another episode when our friend Lorraine Flick joins us to share, among other things, her story of prayer in the workplace. To be notified of when our latest episode releases, just subscribe to or follow this show on the podcast app of your choice. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.